everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is James Hart, and I'm a conservation manager with Pollinator Partnership, and I'm excited to host you all today on behalf of the North American Pollinator Protection Campaign, or NAPPC. This webinar is part of NAPPC's ongoing mission of gathering partners across North America to encourage the health of resident and migratory pollinating animals. NAPPC works to build collaborative working partnerships among its more than 170 partners to raise public awareness about pollinators' importance to agriculture and ecosystems, promote conservation of pollinator habitat, and support scientific, economic, and policy research. In today's webinar, Gail Morris will be presenting some of the latest information that the Southwest Monarch study has found through their ongoing data collection efforts, and a little bit about how that information is changing how we see how monarchs interact with the landscape. Gail is the coordinator of the Southwest Monarch study based in Arizona. She's been researching monarch butterflies since 2006 and is a board member of the Central Arizona Butterfly Association, as well as several other monarch working groups. As we're here today, she's dedicated much of her time to supporting community scientists working on monarch research, education, and conservation. And just a couple other quick notes before we begin. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of the presentation where Gail can answer your questions. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat, either during or at the end of the presentation. And that should be appearing at the bottom of your Zoom screen now. And we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. And then this webinar will be recorded, so we'll be sharing the recording in the coming days. Okay, well, with that, I'll hand it over to Gail.
Happy Earth Day, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am going to share my screen so we can begin our presentation today. Okay, sorry here. So the Southwest Monarch study was founded in 2003 by Chris Klein, and he was a Boyce Thompson Arboretum Education Director at the time. The primary goal of our study was a citizen science research opportunity for all ages to participate, to learn the migration destination of monarchs through our area. And as data offered a new picture of monarchs, the study expanded to offer education and conservation priorities. So this is an overview of our tagging region. Southwest Monarch study is in the blue, as you can see. Monarchs, butterflies in the Pacific Northwest is head by Dr. David James at Washington State. And you can see that California only allows tagging with a special permit to do so. We 2 years ago obtained one of those permits, so we have limited tagging in California in process at this time. Arizona was the first focus of tagging in the Southwest, and then we expanded to the other states. So a little review here. I think most of you know all these, but for those that are unfamiliar, reminder of what the monarch butterfly is here on the upper left. Queen is in the same genus and is present in some of the southern states. And so you'll be seeing some of these, and they're often confused for monarchs in the field. Viceroys, now this viceroy may not look as common depending on where you are, but this is very common in the southern Arizona portion where our viceroys here mimic our queens rather than monarchs, just because of the queen large population, and actually get confused for monarchs more frequently because of their coloration. And of course, the painted lady, which often is confused as baby monarchs in the field. And, you know, we're just happy that people are interested. They reach out and are hoping that they'll jump on board and look at other butterflies in the area and pollinators. Reminder that the life cycle of a monarch from an egg to a butterfly is about 1 month. That breeding monarchs, which are right now, hopefully all around us, depending on where you live 2 to 5 weeks. The fall migration monarchs are not breeding and can live up to 7 months. And all of this is determined by temperature, which can be really challenging in a dry climate, which is more present in the West, of course, but especially in the southern deserts where temperature extremes happen. Remember of a male monarch on the left, a female on the right, thick veins on the female. If that's the only one in front of you, it's hard to identify. So always see if you could see the pouches and the lower wings to identify a male. And that's even more challenging for a while until you're more familiar with them with their wings up. Remember, if you come across monarch larvae, the 5 instar levels, starting with the small egg to the first instar, second, third, fourth, and fifth, that you could measure by the 2 sets of tentacles or filaments on the caterpillar. So these are milkweed larvae that you could come across when you're in the field. The monarch on the left, the queen here in the center. So monarchs, of course, have the 2 sets of tentacles. The queen have 3 sets. And they could be mistaken for each other in the field frequently. This is a monarch on the right and a queen on the left. You can see their dark coloration. That's much more notable than those in the other photos, and that's usually when the temperatures are much colder and the colors when they molt appear darker. Tussock moths are in the higher elevations, many different species, but again, they're all available on milkweeds throughout the year. And don't forget that even though a female monarch can lay 250 to 300 eggs, only 5% of them become new monarchs, primarily because of the predators. And we're learning of new ones all the time. Out here in Arizona, for example, we've learned that roadrunners, one of our more famous birds, so to speak, loves to eat monarchs. We all learn differently. Different charts can relate to by different people. Right now, according to this chart, we should be in the late April stage where the first generation eggs are in the field. We're very close with this warm year to some of them eclosing. It could be like we're not seeing anything in the lower parts of the United States yet. Any activity as that older generation that overwintered dies off. And these have not eclosed yet, but we should see more activity across the area soon. So I want to jump now mainly to the fall migration because most of our data centers on this area. So what are we looking for in the fall with migrating monarchs? So the fall generation that migrates usually is larger and brighter orange monarchs than the ones that may have been in the same field breeding. And so we're always looking for big, bright, fresh-looking monarchs coming through. You'll notice we have another here that says they're feeding rather than breeding. We're seeing monarchs getting along together, so to speak. We're not seeing the males drive off other monarchs in the area or in competition to breed. Instead, sometimes you'll see males and females side by side feeding on a flower to fill up on lipids for their migration. We also start seeing, at least in the southern range, of some limited night clusters, little aggregations that start appearing. As the number of monarchs increase as they work their way down from the north, we'll see more of this in trees. Usually they are small numbers of 10 to 12, usually on the lower branches, especially if it's windy. But on hot days, when they come into the desert, we'll often find them at the tops of trees. So they kind of move in reaction to the weather. Um, and let's never forget the importance of fall blooming nectar to fuel monarchs on their migration. So they will often migrate through an area, move through an area until they find that fall nectar resource, and stay in that area possibly for a day or two, depending on when the last time been able to do that. So, what are monarchs looking for overall? So monarchs always need to have a host plant, and we all know well by now, likely, that milkweed is that one. Arizona has the second highest number of milkweed species, but the importance of nectar plants through all of the seasons when you first start seeing monarchs in your area is especially important because monarchs can lay eggs on milkweed that is not yet in flower. So when it's just coming through the ground, just regrowing, they can often come through and lay eggs. They do need some nectar resources, so keep that in mind wherever you are. Tall trees or shrubs provide protections from predators, intense sun, or heat. They're often a place for mating monarchs in the afternoon hours. In the west, we're finding tall trees and shrubs to the west often are really beneficial in an area with nearby nectar because it offers that shade from that hot afternoon sun that we often have here. And interestingly enough, we are finding in the Southwest in particular the importance of water. Rivers, creeks, seeps, cienagas, ephemeral streams, they all offer more stable temperatures, cooling and resources during the hot weather, and actually a more stable temperatures when they drop nearby. We encourage homeowners when the monarchs are in the area to just dampen soil from drip irrigation, for example, for them to tap into water. But you could see from this photo that was in the Chiricahua Mountains of southeast Arizona, monarchs will go right into the streams when our humidity sometimes can drop as low as 3 or 4%. So this is an idea of some of the areas that tagging has taken place over time. As I mentioned earlier, Arizona, of course, has more because we've been tagging longer. We've been able to expand here in the state. Grand Canyon employees tag and many others, both public land managers as well as private individuals. New Mexico, Las Vegas, and Reno in Nevada have had notable tagging. Utah has just exploded over the last couple months, and we were really excited to have them on board. And also in Colorado, in the northwest corner. So we also tag in that western portion of Colorado. So this is one of our recovery maps. Now, a recovery is a straight line from where a monarch was tagged to until where it was seen again. So this one here, for example, was in New Mexico near Albuquerque, and it went all the way down into Mexico. The red lines were reported in our first paper that was published in 2015, and we're working on a second paper to add all these additional recoveries that have occurred in the last 10 years. Arizona, as we mentioned before, have monarchs that fly to both Mexico and to the coast of California. But now, from the dedication of people in Utah, you can see that it's very possible that some of their monarchs may migrate all the way to Mexico as well. And just to show you how complex this is, where it almost looks like a web in the southern part of the state, I pulled out those from just the Phoenix area. And so we can't even definitively say that monarchs from one location go to this particular place. You can see how they're spread over the entire area. Those from Phoenix are within about 9 miles of each other, and they've been spread along the California coast into at the overwintering sites into Mexico, as well as in Quino Bay along the Baja area. And this is breaking it down more by states of where they have gone. So you can say Utah to Utah, there were three that we were able to see that were of notable distance of over 50 miles that were seen again. It's the map says one has made it into Arizona. There's going to be a second one I'm going to share with you in a little while. That's I think caught a lot of our attention in the fall, and all the way down. There was a point about 4 years ago that the number of monarchs that went from Arizona to California was equal to the number that went to Mexico. But as you can see, more recent recoveries have gone only and been seen in California. So monarchs follow the sun is being shown in research, and a few key migration words or definitions are the word sun angle. You'll hear me use over and over again. It's defined as the angle of the sun at noon each day. And monarch butterflies can adjust their migration flight and fall by the angle of the sun to fly to Mexico or California. And they adjust their flight as it changes when they're flying. A recovery was the word I shared when we were using the maps. And that is the sighting of a tagged monarch more than 50 miles away from where it was tagged. But most of our recoveries are in Mexico or along the California coast. And a few tagged monarchs are seen en route as well. So when there is a sighting of a monarch, for example, along the California coast, we go back to the day it was tagged by the person that did the tagging and find what the sun angle was for that day. And this is a mapping of a graph on the left of monarchs that went to California and Mexico. California are the blue dots. Mexico are the red dots, based on a predicted migration sun angle of 46 to 56 degrees from Dr. Taylor et al. In a published paper. And you can see between these two green lines, a heavy density of these recoveries fell in this area, but we also had a few outliers here, but more so predictably in the area leading up right before that. So the interesting thing about this particular graph is in our first paper when we published this, it showed that if the monarchs were tagged early about 50-degree sun angle, they went to California, and later they went to Mexico. Had we stopped researching then, we never would have seen that with a greater number. So our sample size started increasing. There isn't a pattern to whether they go to Mexico or California. When we take those same recoveries and put them by state, you can see by the color key that it happens through all the states. We have the same pattern of the heaviest density migrating right in this window that was predicted 46 to 56 degrees. Now, when you take all that and you put it in 3-degree buckets, you get a really nice curve, a bell-shaped curve that will help us in time be able to designate the peak migration through the entire area. So this was a kind of exciting finding, but it makes sense. Early on, we'll see only a few monarchs being recovered, but as we get higher, we start seeing more, and then they gradually fade off. So tagging during that peak migration window will improve having a recovery. And when we took just 2014 to 2019 and analyzed all the tags that were recovered during that time, you can see that same pattern reoccurring, that this was the heaviest amount in that when the sun angle was at its peak. That 1 out of 90 or 1 out of 91 monarchs that were tagged were recovered at an overwintering site. And yet, look what happened if you went just a little bit later, another week later, that ratio dropped to 1 out of 494, 1 out of 255. So, this is an important part to keep in mind when we're tagging. And also, which part of the actual migration coming through. In other words, monarchs could come through late, but they might not make it to the overwintering sites. This is a graph based on the findings of Dr. Taylor et al. That we will be fine-tuning about where the peak migration date is in our area. We have already begun working on this, and I could tell you, for example, for the Phoenix area, most of our recoveries are right in this window that is predicted from September 24th to October 9th. Most of ours are around October 10th and 11th, so we're falling right in that area, and we'll be able to have that available for the fall migration. But this is really close what Monarch Watch and their colleagues put together for the East if we extend these over to the West to see the time of peak migration. So the interesting thing is not every monarch that comes through continues their migration through. The fall migration usually ends by December 1st. Gradually, as that sun angle changes more slowly by the end of November, that migration slows markedly as well. And by December 1st, most monarchs usually just stay in the same area where they were rather than migrating. And despite us urging people to continue tagging as long as they're seeing monarchs throughout the winter, the latest tagged migrating monarch was November 19th. And only 3 were tagged in the month of November that made it to an overwintering site. Most monarchs tagged in winter stayed in the local area until spring. So we have a sense of when the migration is, but also when it ends. And what is the source of those winter monarchs? So that's the big question. How are we defining winter monarchs? It's also often defined monarchs as the overwintering sites in California or Mexico. And we ran into this little discussion about titles and words. How do we define them when we were talking a little bit in little groups about how do we define these for the new WAFWA update guidelines? Do we call them overwintering monarchs in Arizona that are here in the Phoenix and Tucson area in the Sonoran Desert? But they're not really the same as those along the coast. Monarchs observed in Texas or the Gulf states during winter were observed to be breeding during the winter months on non-native milkweeds, and they tested with high levels of Ophriocistus electroscura OE. So, but are all winter monarchs breeding? That was our question. And Arizona has evergreen milkweeds that do not die back for the winter. These are also in the portion of the Sonoran Desert that goes all the way up to Palm Springs in California as well. And we know monarchs have been there. We, for our first paper, tested over 400 monarchs for OE in these 2 regions, and the OE rate was 4%, much lower than what was found along the California coast and in many other parts of the West. These are the 3 milkweeds that are evergreens in Arizona, if you're not familiar with them. This is the desert rush milkweed. We call it I'm sorry, we call it desert milkweed, but all the nomenclature calls it rush. It's interesting. We have heavy discussions about this online. It's Asclepias subulata, the pine leaf milkweed, Asclepias linearia, if we're having a warm weather, does not lose its leaves. And Arizona milkweed, Asclepias angustifolia, is native to southeast Arizona, but many gardeners have moved it now into the Phoenix and Tucson areas. So we decided to try to see how we could learn more about these monarchs. And monarch tagging typically is utilized to track the fall migration and depends on an observer for those recoveries. Continued tagging and monitoring of monarchs in winter might give us new insights as to their breeding and non-breeding status, because remember, breeding monarchs live 3 to 5 weeks. So if we have a monarch that lives maybe 8 weeks, that could probably bring to mind that possibly a portion of its life was non-breeding, even if we happen to see it breeding at the time of our sighting 8 weeks later. So we encouraged everyone to continue their tagging monarchs in December, January, and February, and note resightings and the monarch behaviors that they observed. So another part of this observation time was keeping in mind what was happening with those who were breeding. So you can see that even after a snow and a freeze in Tucson in February 23rd, the larvae survived. So they finally likely found a warm little micro space to survive that effect, even though the milkweed colors are showing the stress of the cold temperatures around. And down here on Asclepias subulata, an egg that was laid on October 26th, it didn't eclose as a new butterfly until January 24th of that year. So here's a sample using the temperatures that were present in 2021 winter of a monarch was laid an egg at the beginning of October that came in late. That would become a new butterfly right around the end of October, pretty close to what we're used to seeing. But look what happens if a monarch came in at the beginning of December and was laying eggs. That monarch wouldn't eclose until later in spring because the nighttime temperatures would hover around 32, 33. The daytime temperatures might make it up to 60, sometimes 70, but there was these fluctuating extremes of temperatures that could be 30, 40 degrees in a day. And if there was any question how many monarchs were here in the winter, I pulled this chart just for you to see this quick overview, how the numbers were increasing up to 2021. We have not tabulated this year's numbers because some of the winter data is coming in, but we easily have over 1,000 that were tagged at the end of February and beginning of March this year. So these were the monarch winter long timers as an example of some of our findings. We had one back in 2019, in January 16th, that was originally tagged in October. This monarch was flying for 96 days. So likely part of his life, if not all of it, was as a non-breeder. The next one here that was tagged by Tom at the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum on November 15th was seen 98 days later by Edwin at the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum, 98 days later. So some of these monarchs we have are likely non-breeding as well as breeding here in the lower deserts. And that kind of opens up a whole new understanding and also a need for what we are providing, for example, for nectar to help them through this period on warm days when it's warm enough for them to fly. The exciting thing for us, and I know many of you have heard about this, have been with the Project Monarch Bluetooth tagging. We were the first here in Arizona to use the radio tags last year in October. The migration was delayed that year, so we had to put everything on hold. And then finally, a Monarch came through. We radio tagged at Scottsdale Community College. They call themselves the Arties. They're the artichokes. So they worked with us and helped us net a few monarchs, and we labeled them Artie 1, 2, 3 accordingly to track them. And here you can see a monarch up in a mesquite tree, and we were able to track their movements in the riparian area in the center of campus. This monarch stayed in the area about 3 weeks. And that was an exciting moment for us for the first time to be able to track movements, where they were going, where they were visiting. This monarch stayed very close to this area until we were not able to get a detection again. We did a lot of research that winter through the courtesy of the Desert Botanical Gardens and using their butterfly pavilion when it wasn't in use, of testing monarchs to see how safe the radio tags were and to see if there was any difference in longevity between a monarch with a radio tag, a monarch that went through the preparations for a radio tag, but did not have one attached. Was it too stressful just to be limited in their movements? For example, for the time it took to put a radio tag on with a blue tag and no tag. And we found no difference in longevity during that time period. And you can see Dr. Ron Ratowski, who's on our board and works with us measuring the wings. We measured wings, we weighed the monarchs. We had to restrain them to put the tags on. And then we monitor them individually every other day in the pavilion by not only registering the number of radio tags that were being detected, but actually visually seeing the monarch so we could account for their presence. Then this year, we had great plans for the fall migration of this year. And then for the second year in a row, the migration was extremely delayed. And the monarchs that came through because of the massive heat waves we were having, when they did come through, were breeding. And so we didn't want to radio tag breeding monarchs again. And it mainly because of the sensitivity to the cost of the radio tags from our donations that we received. So we went into our plan B, which was if we couldn't find a good number of monarchs that were migrating through in that peak migration window when we knew they might be able to be detected en route, we would switch and radio tag monarchs in November and December at the end of this last year to see what they would do during the winter months. So you can see this is the Scottsdale Community College two-water riparian oasis area. There's a pond in this area. This is blue mist flowers that stay blooming all the way through this time period. You can see the flowers in bloom here. This is a Baja fairy duster that this monarch came to I think she was seen in January. So when we came on campus, we would put our Project Monarch apps on, and you can see how they would vary from time to time that we came in. The exciting thing, though, is their staff, their students also put the Project Monarch apps on when they were there. So we were able to get good signals from those monarchs that were in the area when they were flying. And students and the staff seemed to enjoy it, saying it just made their day, coming in wondering how many would we see today. These two monarchs stood out for their activities, and they're kind of funny in the respect that they're so different from each other. Artie 253 was radio tagged at the beginning of November. you can see the movement. This is the red star was where it was radio tagged at the uh, riparian habitat. And this one would fly back and forth to the greenhouse, where of course there was a lot of nectar, and then back through this little walkway that had a lot of nectar and flower, and then back to the riparian area. So this one stayed alive for, I'm trying to think, 75 days that we were able to get a detection on. So we were happy to see that. And RD255 was similar in the number of days since the release, but this one was very different. This one just stayed around the greenhouse. This one was radio tagged at the greenhouse, and you can see he just stayed right in this area rather. This is the riparian area down here. They were very limited in their movements. We didn't get any detections by the parking lots or any of those areas at the time. So this started reinforcing what we were talking about earlier, that not all monarchs during the winter are breeders. Some of them are in the same state like we see at the overwintering sites, whether it is diapause or another, Dr. David James likes to talk about oligopause, where they're only non-breeding for a short period before they become breeders again. There's more research to be done, more things to examine, but I wanted to share that information with you. This was the most exciting one. I think many of us were aware of the radio tagging by Natasha Haddon of the U.S. Forest Service up in Vernal, Utah, that made it all the way down into Arizona. So here's Vernal, Utah, right near Dinosaur National Monument. And she was using the Blue Plus uh, radio tags, the new generation that are picked up more frequently on our phones. And you could see for the first 2 weeks, she wasn't picked up at all. And then all of a sudden, she started coming in. And I remember I was looking yesterday at Natasha's email saying, Gail, look where they are. She's coming in. And so she came into Arizona and we watched her come in all the way. She was also wearing a blue tag, the CT478. So she had one of our Southwest tags on her as well. You have to remember, we're still learning how long these radio tags stay on monarchs when we radio tag them. So the blue tag gave an extra level of assurance. And I might like to let you know that all of those that we radio tagged had blue tags as well. And that only added on a 0.01 of a gram to their weight on their back of the 0.06 that the radio tags weigh. So this was an exciting find. She stopped moving just north of Tucson, outside of Superior. So we were curious when we stopped getting detections where she was, and the question was, did she find a new place to overwinter in Arizona that no one knew about? So it was a kind of remote area. We hopped into a four-wheel drive and went out to the area and look at the flowers, look at the nectar that was in bloom. This was at the end of December, and we had had a very late heavy rain in October, and everything was in bloom in the desert after going through an incredible period of drought. So it was exciting to know that wherever she was in this area, there were food resources available. So right now, our spring resource is our spring migration radio tagging is in progress, and we are trying to address the question if winter monarchs in Arizona are a sink. We have been told this, that they don't really do much to help the monarch population, and so we thought we would dedicate 10 radio tags. These are the Blue Plus tags, so we could watch their movements to see where they go. Do they go anywhere? And so far, we've radio tagged 5. And we numbered all of them starting with SWM and then 001 going up and counting. Some of them may have another name. If someone gave and asked us to use some of their freshly closed monarchs, all of these were freshly closed plus 2 days. So we made sure they had the opportunity to feed, and then we radio tagged them. So number 1 and 2 were radio tagged in Chandler at this point. This female flew all over the place, and these are the last 1,000 detections. She went right near the reservation and then came up and started heading up north as we started getting near 100. Then the temperature cooled, and she's kind of been hanging out in this Paradise Valley area since then. We have 3 females, 2 males tagged. The exciting one was SWM004, Keeley. I'll call her just Keeley to make it easy here. She was radio tagged in Apache Junction for 2 days. She stayed in the area nectaring. She finally moved up to right near the Salt River, where one day we lost detection of her. And we were so excited the next morning to have her appear in Show Low, Arizona, 100 miles away. Later that day, she moved up to St. John's, and that was our last detection of her. We haven't heard from her in a week. That doesn't mean we're done hearing from her. She may reappear. This is a very remote area and reservation land as well. So we'll have to see if she reappears or not. This is the border with New Mexico. This is the border with Colorado and Utah. So we'll have to see if she shows up. But if anything else, it shows that our monarchs do move out of the Phoenix area and can contribute to the population. So I always like to say, what can you do to help? I think so many of you on this webinar already do so many fantastic things in so many ways for monarchs and pollinators. And I salute you for your efforts and love your dedication. But we can always encourage neighborhood parks, your own yard, workplace, churches to plant milkweed, plant monarch's favorite nectar for each season when they're in your region, plant favorite trees or shrubs for shade or a place of refuge nearby. You can join us tagging and monitoring. This is a National Park Service at the Grand Canyon. Or contribute your data. I know there's many different places to contribute your monarch data. As you heard in the introduction today, every other week or so, I try to write an article for Journey North on Western monarchs and what is happening. We'll have one next week on this with our radio tagging efforts and some of the efforts that are going on in California radio tagging as well. So I'm going to end this with some trivia. You may be surprised to hear the first Arizona to Mexico recovery of a monarch was tagged in Phoenix in October 2004. Think of how long ago that was. Longest flight from Utah was to Arizona for 510 miles. Longest flight to California from Arizona was 774 miles. And to date, so far, the longest migration flight that we've had has been from Camp Verde, Arizona to Mexico, 1,247 miles. There are so many people to thank for their support of the Southwest Monarch Study, whether it's our community colleges, Desert Botanical Garden, Cape May for their Project Monarch efforts with us, Monarch Joint Venture, Xerces Society. We had many anonymous donors. Otherwise, this would not have been possible. We are totally dependent on outside help. And over 400 dedicated Southwest Monarch Study taggers. We just could not do it without them. So we hope you'll consider joining us in the field sometime. Let us know if we can support your efforts. This is our contact information. Or you could go to our Facebook page or our webpage, swmonarchs.org. And thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gail, for that informative and inspiring presentation. It's really cool to hear about those insights into where monarchs are going, and it's really cool that we have the kind of technology to tell that kind of thing now. Well, yeah, we have some time for questions now, so I'd encourage those in the audience to enter any questions you have in the Q&A box. Um, Looks like we have one in there now, so I'll pull that up. Um, Somebody's wondering if there is anything like this in Texas.
I believe there is. I know Monarch Watch does a lot of tagging in Texas, but I think there is a Texas organization there. And I don't know the name of it offhand, but I think it's called Texas Monarch Watch. So try Googling that and seeing if you could find that. Okay, great.
Yeah, and somebody else just entered in the chat that Environment for the Americas is doing some tagging in Texas.
Great.
Let's see if any other questions have come through. Don't see any yet, but yeah, if you have anything you're curious about, feel free to enter that into the Q&A box.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to urge everyone is to realize that we don't have all the answers and everything while everyone's thinking about questions. And that sometimes information changes over time. So we have to keep going back and looking and seeing if that answer to that question still held, like we maybe have learned 5 or 10 years ago. So,
Okay, well, yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or the
okay.
Q&A box. Maybe I'll just give it another moment or two. Oh yeah, so here's one. Somebody's wondering, are you looking at tagging in southern Idaho?
There, I think the tagging in southern Idaho is through Monarch Watch. There is an organization, I think they're going to start some radio tagging there this fall, if I remember correctly. But I apologize, I don't know the name of the organization. If you write to Monarch Watch, they could probably tell you more details about that. I- There's a question in the chat that I see, if you don't mind me jumping in, James.
Yeah, totally.
There's no stupid questions, first of all. I think all of us have asked questions that we feel that way, but I think it's good for us all to be aware of. I think is a scientist monarch. I think I might have said something incorrectly. Community science or citizen scientist means that that person doesn't need to have a degree to be able to give valuable data to get more information, in this case, about monarchs. There's communities or citizen scientists across the country that you become trained in how to gather the data. We have, for example, data sheets that you complete, with GPS and gender, what that monarch was doing, besides the actual tag number. And you submit that information. And so we all learn together. The people that can't get out in the field get the data to be able to connect these dots to learn things or to run them through mathematical models to see is this a significant finding or not. So this just means that we could all learn together. And I, for example, have learned when we're looking for larvae, children are shorter and they find them all the time, far better than we do. And so there's a place for everyone. And retirees have sometimes more time to be able to get out in the field and do it. So it's different. There's room for everybody. And people of your age, James, you can get out and run and do these things a lot better than we can as we age. So that's what I'm saying is it's all of us together with different insights and gifts, and we could all learn together.
Great. Yeah. And, one other question, the Q&A, it looks like, do you share this data with universities or other researchers that might be doing similar projects?
Yes, we do. We do data sharing agreements just like they would with us if we asked for the data, and we work that out. Yeah. In fact, some of the information about radio tags, some guidelines that we're going to be coming up with is going to come from us sharing our data, especially like the best time to be doing this. So if we have a lower Western monarch population right now, we should be using the peak time where we have the best chance of a migrating monarch coming through rather than just tagging any monarch, because we're excited to use a radio tag to see what they do. And we could help with that with our data to home people in.
Great. Well, there are no other questions for the moment, but maybe I'll just leave it for one more moment just to see if there are any last ones that come in. Okay, well, yeah, I don't see any others.
That's fine.
So yeah, we could probably wrap it up there then. But yeah, if anybody thinks of any questions after this, definitely feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure Gail will be happy to answer your questions that come up via email. And I think, Gail, you would put the email or the contact information for the Southwest Monarch study in your slides. So would that be the best address to reach out to?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
We're pretty easy to find on the website. If you just Google Southwest Monarchs, we should come up as well, in case if you don't have that written down. But we look forward to hearing from you. Just thank you for your interest and thank you for your dedication to pollinators and monarchs, and just have a great Earth Day.
Yeah, thank you, Gail, and yeah, thank you for being here and sharing your insights,
Thanks.
and really for everything that you do for monarch butterflies.
Thank you.
So, thank you, everyone, and yeah, hope you have a good rest of your Earth Day.